Great. Welcome back, everybody, from what appears to be some pretty dynamic roundtable discussions. We're still waiting for some of our roundtable leaders to join the panelist group, but we have a few here right now. So instead of going in the order that was on the agenda, we're going to start off, if it's okay with Laura, with roundtable number 3. And as I said earlier, we're using the quad charts as the method for reporting out the productive discussions that you all just had. So over to you, Laura. And welcome. Nice to see you.
Yes, great. Thank you. I'm happy to be here on the last morning of the summit, finally. And I will share my screen so that we can see, hopefully now, everyone can see the quadrant output that we worked on during our call to action session. And I know we don't have a lot of time this morning, so we'll just encourage everybody listening to please either chime in if there's the chat function through the WOVA app that we can capture afterwards, or otherwise contact the IHCC staff so that we can get your thoughts on this going forward to integrate into the work that the policy group will do over the next year. So I'll just, I guess, walk through the various quadrants quickly. Again, summit insights, I'm going to confess there are only a few bullets here because I have been sick all week, and so I have not been at the summit, but I listened to a couple of the recorded sessions and also heard from some in our session this morning, certainly that, and have heard at every IHCC meeting I have been to date, the data sharing needs are ubiquitous. And so bringing together resources and expertise around how to facilitate data sharing is something that remains as relevant as it was on day one. And so that means there's a lot of quote job security in terms of thinking about these issues. And so again, encourage folks to join us. The other thing that I did hear in one of the recorded sessions that I listened to, the cohort in the box, was for me very exciting. And that was the sequencing of thinking about the policy relevant questions up front, right after you're thinking about your vision for your cohort and what to do, and the fact that by considering what the policy parameters might be, it really helps to enable you to design how you are going to do things in a way that will be as efficient as possible, as well as responsible and ethically sound as possible. And so just wanted to trumpet that as well in terms of an insight. I'm going to jump on over first, I think, then to the actionable priorities, which is a focus for our group a lot in terms of being very pragmatic and concrete in terms of what the resources are to facilitate IHCC going forward, and in particular, the IHC scientific projects. And so over the next 6 to 12 months, we really are excited to begin designing the content based on our scientific project experiences for a quote starter pack around the policy issues. What do you need to know as a project coming together for collaborations? And honestly, that's IHCC or otherwise, and helping to, again, put that in an easy to find place for everyone so that when it is time, you have on a real-time need to know basis what you're looking for, and hopefully can get started that much faster. In order to do that, we'll be putting together some action teams to tackle specific components so that we can be efficient in our work, and then come back together and assemble the entire pack. Also, looking forward to, again, learning and partnering with our IHCC scientific projects, our data atlas working group, our scientific project group, for all of the lessons that have been learned on the ground in bringing cohorts together so that we are, again, being as relevant and specific as possible in the work that we are trying to bring to bear for the whole consortium. Also moving forward with a quote help desk concept as a way to create an open dialogue with all member cohorts. Any collaborative project to reach out to us as well as others for resources and let us know what your need is, what question you have. Can we provide real-time input, point you to a resource as you need it if it's not already available through a central source. Moving over to the collaboration opportunities, as well as one publication opportunity that we've identified to date. Again, consider how we can continue working with others in this space. In particular, are there ways we could join forces with the Global Genomics and Medicine Collaborative to amplify the work that we've each been trying to do individually, but also continuing our relationship building and our partnerships with others in the global, through the Global Forum, which Nikki Tiffin spoke about yesterday, the progress made there, but really thinking about other specific projects with ICDA or GBMI, where we could partner and advance activities more quickly together or in unique ways by dividing and conquering rather than all duplicating the same work. As I already mentioned, partnering with our IHTC work groups and scientific projects. And then finally, again, in terms of contributing to the generalizable knowledge in the field, making sure that we are bringing our IHTC perspectives to bear through activities like the Global Forum, contributing to their publication that they have going forward, looking for opportunities where we might publish on our own learning specific to IHCC as well. So I can stop there. I believe we were supposed to keep it to 5 minutes and can take, I don't think we're taking questions at this point versus at the end, but Jeff, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks also for summarizing what sounds like was a very productive 45 minutes with the policy and systems working group. I would encourage anybody who wants to make comments on the quad chart outputs from Laura and the other ones to just put those in the chat. We'll capture everything at this point. We're on a little bit of a shorter timeline this morning, so in the interest of time, we'll just keep going. And again, thanks, Laura, for summarizing your group's efforts. Let's go back to the first one, Training and Workforce Development Working Group. And Albert, I'll call on you to summarize your group's productive discussions.
Okay, let me share the screen. Okay. Well, thank you very much for everyone that participated on this workshop. So in terms of summits inside, we discussed two main things. One, the idea of developing global mentorship. So how can junior researchers get input from senior members or middle career members from other parts of the globe, and how we can transmit knowledge from one institution to another. We've been in a way we've been trying to set that up. We've been trying to pair up people with senior members of IHCC, and we probably need to keep working on that. In a way, we want people to get the best opportunities that they can get, and identifying the right mentor for the moment in people's career or the project they are working on is quite relevant. Probably need to think, I think, carefully how we make that happen. In terms of how we could fund it, Jeff suggested that through industrial partnerships, we could maybe offer some. We could get some funding, and that would also offer academic training to those that get into the mentorship scheme. And I guess we would need to develop some clear ideas of what do we mean by mentorship, and what are the aims of a particular mentorship scheme. So we are also consistent on the help that we are offering different people, and that actually people can read it and see what it is on offer. We also discuss peer-to-peer work, like the one that happens in the UK on genomic medicine centers, where people can actually ask for questions in specific areas or specific problems that they have. It was not clear in the group what was the model of how information is transmitted in the UK. Maybe someone else here knows. And I would welcome if someone can drop me an email if they know how these things work better. Ideally, I guess this could be some kind of fancy Slack where maybe more confidential information can be shared. In the third idea that we discussed was this idea of developing data analysis skill for longitudinal records. And sorry, Dementia Platforms UK has a 3 levels of has training modules at 3 different levels of introductory, middle, and datathon. And the 2 training courses last for about a week. Well, for a week. And we've been discussing how we could actually promote that kind of training partnership between DP UK and IHCC, and maybe aiming to develop a face-to-face meeting at one of the big conferences that happens one a year. And we kind of discussed maybe ICDA, which usually happens around this time of the year, and maybe the American Society of Human Genetics meeting, which usually also happens in November. So that would give us about a time if we could do it. In terms of publication and collaboration opportunities, we discuss the idea of writing what our training model would be, some kind of white paper. We're not quite sure what journal might be interested in this, but it could also potentially be a white paper of all the working groups that we have, and maybe put everything together. I don't know. We could discuss that. Qatar Biobank also is developing 5 training modules, and they are looking for input on what they should include, what people is interested. So if you could offer insight into that once, that would be also good. And in terms of actionable priorities for next year, we were wondering whether we could actually chip in on the Mauco program as a springboard to test some of the ideas that we've been discussing before, that they do have some funding for people to move around Chile. So maybe we could ask those people what they think about these ideas and the different activities. We also talk about developing a journal club when there is a seminar schedule gap, when we don't have a speaker for a particular month. Maybe we could develop a journal club to improve the critical skills of younger researchers. Also, we would to identify people that would be happy to contribute training, and tell us what specific skills they would like or techniques they would like to train others on. And that's it. I'm not quite sure whether I've run out of time or not, but that's it. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Albert. It's clear. Well, first of all, from what we've seen in the last from you and from Laura, is that very practical and implementable ideas are coming out of these discussions. So I'm very excited to hear what and see what we'll be able to do in the future. Let's keep moving, and I'll ask Philip and Helen to report out on the Data Standards and Infrastructure Working Group output.
Great, thank you, Jeff. I think Philip's going to share the screen and I'll speak to it, if this works. That looks great. It's not in presentation mode. If you could blow it up a bit, that would be good. Perfect. Thank you. We had quite an interesting discussion around, I'll start with the summit insights. We talked a little bit about cloud environments. So people are deploying their resources on different cloud environments. We talked about looking at the strengths and weaknesses of those. There's a desire for full portability across cloud environments and potentially an ability to do a collective negotiation for storage and infrastructure costs to bring those down kind of globally. There's some work has already been done by all of us, and Chris has offered to share some of their principles of multi-cloud where there is replication across different clouds. We followed that up with a discussion about cohort in a box. So this is a reference back to a previous presentation in the summit where there were discussions about cohorts where there was some standardization around data sharing, what kind of environment you might choose and why, and things like governance. And that was followed up with an action that I'll get to in a moment, but there was felt to be some useful things there to discuss with people who was either starting cohorts or perhaps from ones that were at different points on the maturity scale for the infrastructure. I'll move to the collaboration and publication opportunities. So there's a ton of data being generated from cohorts that's available in the literature. Some of it's available in secondary resources. Full disclosure, I run one of those secondary resources. And we felt that some of that data could be mapped back onto IHCC to improve discoverability, but also to show the impacts that the cohorts are having and to provide some abilities to look across the cohorts. We also noted that there were ways to link across data sets. It can be done easily by publications, but it's more complicated than that when you get into things like registries. But there are opportunities when mapping into things like administrative databases. And the one that was highlighted was an exposure database in Canada. It's great that data dictionaries could be made available. It's really helpful to understand some provenance about those and to also understand how they're being used in different contexts. The follow-on from that is how are endpoints and outcomes defined? What are the standards for those? Quite often when secondary resources get the data that's published, the decisions about endpoints have been made, and it can be hard to do interoperability across particular disease studies between cohorts. And we've discussed also that if we share derived data, that's one way to demonstrate impact and also to get past some of the data sharing barriers to do with individual level data. But of course, those are still very important things to address. I'll speak briefly about the funding opportunities. So external funding to support the portal development and inclusion of more cohorts is important. We identified potential to work with disease foundations. For example, cases where you would need pan-cohort activities. We need a success story for those. And we thought that one might come from rare disease or where studies were not sufficiently powered to do analysis within a single cohort. And then there's a note that's a follow-on from the environment discussion about collective negotiation, which isn't funding, but it might bring the price down, and that would be useful in itself. And so I'll wrap up with the actionable priorities. To discover what's possible with respect between individual and derived data and how that can be done. Is that a tiered data sharing scenario? Is it a decision about what can be shared that's derived, and to come up with models for that? To think about linking and standardizing phenotypes, but also outcomes. There are already some phenotype libraries out there. Those might be of interest to people in IHCC. Some collaboration activities. So there's some nice work being done by the Global Meta-Analysis Initiative. I hope I got that acronym right, which is about how things can be harmonized and then that can benefit IHCC, and there might be some reciprocal sharing of knowledge, but also potentially some representation of data. I already mentioned cohort in a box. We had a discussion about whether cohort in a box was feasible for some resources and to really think about how a checklist could be developed so people could start to engage with that. And that was a feedback to the cohort in a box group. And then finally, a pilot of some kind to look up across cohorts or to show how power can be improved as the kind of exemplar and case study that demonstrates value. So hopefully I've covered everything we discussed, and I'll just check in with Philip to see if he wants to add anything. And thanks very much for making the great notes, Philip.
Thanks, Ellen. No, that was fantastic. Thank you.
All right, I agree. That was excellent. And again, continuing to move forward with very practical and pragmatic ideas that hopefully we'll see implemented over the next year or so. So we'll just close out this report out with Adam on the Scientific Strategy and Cohort Enhancements Working Group.
Great, thanks, Jeff, and thanks to all the participants who contributed in the scientific strategy breakout. We had a lively discussion involving people from different areas, industry partners, funders, IHCC members from different parts of the world, etc. So lots of enthusiasm about some of the great things we've heard in the summit that had over the last few days that really energized and enthused people. So, for example, revelations about the potential of partnership with industry, particularly in low and middle income countries, not just in parts of the world that are traditionally partnered with industry. Enthusiasm for really, we've seen some great cross-country, cross-continent pilot projects and COVID projects. And I think COVID's really exemplified increased understanding of how we can rapidly work together across the planet with diverse cohorts to answer questions of mutual interest. So we'll come back to that in the actionables. And also this kind of enthusiasm around how we can capitalize on the survey results feeding into the atlas to kind of showcase IHCC to potential funders and members. So people talked about other examples of sitting on a call with somebody and showing the riches of the data, being able to look at exactly how many people you've got in these different cohorts that might tick the box for a particular project or funding, and how that can really drive activity here. Maybe to go to the bottom left, we didn't think so much about the publication collaboration opportunities, I think partly because there's quite a lot going on already, but one collaboration within IHCC that we discussed was around, as we thought about the funding opportunities, was thinking particularly around mentoring and perhaps collaborating with the training working group there. For a variety of purposes, but including how do we mentor people to think about some of the things we're thinking about in terms of seeking diverse funding opportunities or leveraging something like IHCC, and how maybe that's a gap in people's skills base or trainings base. I think there's also a suggestion around kind of exchange programs and how that could help with those kind of things. We talked a lot about funders and funding models up in the top right. So clearly the summit has given some kind of inspiration. So we had an excellent presentation from the Wellcome Trust around their focus on climate and health. And I think we maybe identified that we weren't the people on the call within those cohorts who could necessarily react to that and answer that question. So I think identifying some of the key thought leaders within IHCC who might be related to these cohorts, but in the scientific domain could be relevant, as well as thinking about how do we engage other agencies. So, for example, the idea that in climate science there may be a lot of these kind of big data holders that could be linked together with the cohorts. So it comes more to the kind of cohort enhancement, but how do we broker those? How do we react to the funding landscape? And same with Chan Zuckerberg, for example. We had insights around the kinds of things they're doing. How do we identify, where is the overlap of interest here? Where are the bits that the diverse cohorts within IHCC could contribute to? So I think we identified there a kind of a gap, or if you like, an area where we need to put some thought into how to capitalize on these opportunities that have been, if you like, presented already. As we had industry representatives and we have exemplars, we thought about how we might engage more with industry. We discussed the fact there's different models. So, for example, we heard about the Olink proteomics approach within UK Biobank, how that came from a consortium of pharma funders around one cohort. How could we expand that model to multiple cohorts? We can continue to build on the model whereby individual cohorts seek funding and we kind of build up from bottom-up approaches and come together. But how do we also think about kind of multi-funder, multi-cohort funding? We also thought about that in the context of the successful Davos Alzheimer's collaborative pilot. So now it's kind of saying, well, these might be general population cohorts largely, but there are possibilities here for people interested in certain diseases. And how do we leverage, therefore, how do we bring together those people to say, look, across these cohorts, there could be a huge amount of data on your disease of interest. We need to think about capitalizing on that too. We also discussed as well about different parts of the world and about how we might showcase perhaps to local funders what's going on in other places, or to more funders with broader global reach, to help realize the vision here and to help particularly support local funders to realize the opportunities that come with more global collaboration. In terms of the actionables, I think that I've tried to kind of distill them here into 3 areas, because there were lots of suggestions. There was a key one about matchmaking and IHCC's role as a matchmaker, and that was particularly thinking about how do we go between, we've collated all these, we've come together as a group of cohorts, and there are funders with different interests. So, for example, Cindy Lawley from Olink was talking about how she spends a lot of time in her role brokering between pharma with particular disease interests and cohorts who have that information. So how can IHCC do the same thing at this kind of global scale? So I think really matchmaking between their funding agencies or possible funding opportunities and the cohorts, I think, was one thing. We also talked a lot about empowering in different sense. So, for example, how do we empower IHCC members to start projects? And we had one such example, a kind of bottom up, reaching out to the cohorts to kind of say, we'd like to do this project, put together a funding application. Would you be interested? So I think we've got some ideas around how IHCC might be able to do better at that, at helping people to do that, empowering people in terms of feeling like they can reach into IHCC and come up with these ideas, but also then in some ways kind of coming up with what's the value proposition we have in IHCC. How do we empower the potential funders to come to us and say, this looks like an attractive opportunity. And I think one thing that led from a lot of this was whether we need some kind of networks or communities of investigators who can have shared interests. That might be, we talked about people who are interested, for example, in vaccine response. Who are the people around IHCC? There must be or climate science or proteomics. There must be people across the collaboration here who would be interested to pull together in the same direction. And at the moment, we have very generic working groups, but would it be worth standing up some of these networks of interested investigators who could say, look, we are the people on the climate science side. We've identified cohorts that would be interested in funding opportunities. So I think trying to think about better ways to empower the community to capitalize on what we've built so far and take it forward in the next 6 to 12 months. And I'll stop there.
Great, that was perfect, Adam, and I really enjoyed seeing the quad chart format. I don't know if you guys who presented were enamored with it, but I think it's a very crisp way to channel the discussion back. And what we're going to do going forward is we'll certainly make sure that the outputs of the working group discussions today, which were a smallish subset of the working groups, that they get back to the working group members and the IHCC membership as a whole. And I think the IHCC Secretariat will be preparing an executive summary of this meeting for distribution. So many of the thoughts that you guys have conveyed today will be shared with the rest of the IHCC over the next few weeks, certainly we hope by the beginning of the year, so that we can continue to move this agenda forward. Thanks again to all of you for leading those breakouts and the working groups, as well as your report outs. What I'd like to do, looking at the time, is to maybe close today's meeting with a few reflections. I think, as evidenced by what we just heard from the 4 working groups, that the IHCC is very strong, and we've built a great foundation and strategic vision. And I want to remind you that we're only 3 years young as a consortium, and have really done most of this in the middle of a pandemic. And that's my cat Astro in the background. Our 4 work streams, as you've just heard, have been incredibly productive. We've built and continue to build a data architecture and atlas. We've developed foundational policies that are enabling global collaboration. We're focusing on the next generation of cohort scientists and leaders, and we're catalyzing scientific opportunities across cohorts, most importantly across the equator. I heard a number of really great opportunities surface at the summit in climate, environment, and health, in emerging infections and in pandemic preparedness, in our ability to scale genomics and to incorporate other omics analyses into what we do in the area of mental health, and also to develop an accessible infrastructure using cloud-based platforms. Cohort in a Box was, I think, a very vibrant and continues to be a very interesting concept for us to pursue. And we also explored, I think, in much greater detail, our opportunity to work with industry who has similar goals to address data-intensive global health problems. And we also heard about the opportunities and the needs in South America, Africa, and India, particularly yesterday. And then finally, the LMIC cohorts remain a challenge, but are at the forefront of our vision of the IACC. We're learning a lot from our partners and colleagues in India, from Africa and the APCC, from Brazil and South America. And yesterday highlighted, and some of today's discussion highlighted the aspects of data science being a really critical need for leveling the playing field and making cohorts equals in research. And then we also heard just now about mentorship and training opportunities that abound for as areas for investment that the IHCC could enable. The 4 action plans that we heard were I think, incredibly precise and crisp and actionable. And so as I think about closing this meeting, one of the things I was reflecting on is that it's really been a challenge for us to do this virtually. We started the IHCC in 2018. We had our first pre-consortium meeting at Duke University in the United States, and we had a second meeting in Iceland in 2019. And then when the pandemic hit, we switched to an all virtual platform for the last 3 years. And while we have adapted, I think there's really no substitute for building a network, a coalition, collaborations, a consortium without being in person. We need to be in person. The sidebar conversations, the conversations that happen outside the meeting agenda are incredibly important and powerful. So one of the things I want to leave you with as we close this summit is to challenge the IACC to meet in person in 2023. I think this is really key to our sustainability and our impact, and I hope you will agree. Finally, I want to thank the amazing people who made this week's summit possible, and thanks for bringing up the slide that highlights first the planning committee, Katerina, Kobus, Raman, Latifa, Chisholm, and Scott from the IACC Secretariat, and Amanda and Carly, who have been amazing in the background, enabling the platform for us to have this wonderful summit these last few days. And then I also want to acknowledge, I think it's on the next slide, just the amazing IACC Secretariat, particularly Scott, who is the leader of the IACC, a director of the IACC, helped by Chisholm, who was very much the brainchild for this summit and its organization, with help from Teji and Latifa, John, Carlos, Shimal, Meredith, Chris, and Farah. So we have an awesome backbone that's helping many of our volunteers able to achieve the wonderful work that we're doing. And I just, if we could be in person, I would ask for a round of applause for both the planning committee and the IAC Secretariat. So I hopefully I'm hearing you applaud virtually. Again, thank you, team, for making this happen. And then I guess finally, on behalf of Peter and Michelle, I want to wish you all a very safe and healthy 2023, good holidays, and really looking forward to a very productive year ahead. And as I said, I hope that we can shake hands or virtual or hug each other or something in person that's not virtual next year, and really continue to make the IACC a great success. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you all.